In this paper, I will explore the idea that for its creator, Edith, Lady Londonderry, Mount Stewart was very special, the land of heart's desire, where daily life was enhanced by a deep sense of otherworldliness and enchantment. I will consider Edith's upbringing in the Scottish Highlands and the various elements of her identity, especially her affinity with and deep understanding of Irish myths and legends, and acknowledge that if Irving Goffman's idea of life as a theatrical performance is correct, and that this performance, as Judith Butler proposes, is not a mere reflection of an internal self, but is constitutive of the identity itself, at Mount Stewart, Edith's identity found its fullest expression. Edith Londonderry was born in 1878, the elder daughter of Henry Chaplin, a renowned sportsman and staunchly Conservative MP. In 1877, Chaplin had married Lady Florence Leveson Gower, the elder daughter of the third Duke of Sutherland, who died tragically a mere 5 years later, shortly after the birth of her third child. Edith and her brother Eric and sister Florence were largely brought up by their uncle Strath, who had become the fourth Duke of Sutherland, and his beautiful young wife Millicent, at the Sutherland family home of Dunrobin Castle, a fine house set in splendid gardens on the northeast coast of Scotland, some 200 miles north of Edinburgh. In 1899, Edith married Charles Stewart, the elder son of the 6th Marquis of Londonderry, thereby uniting two of the most wealthy and influential families in the land. Edith's idyllic upbringing and roots in the Scottish Highlands left her with a lifelong passion and love for Scotland, a Celtic land, a passion she'd later extend to include another Celtic kingdom, Ireland. The Celtic world, in fact, comprises 6 key regions: Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Cornwall, the Isle of Man and Brittany, linked together by shared languages, cultures, and historical ties. As strikingly beautiful as her aunt, Edith also had huge personal charm, a wonderfully warm and welcoming manner, and a delightfully light-hearted and fun-loving nature. Her granddaughter, Lady Rose Lauritsen, recalls, "She was able to make one feel as if one was the most important person in the world, absolutely the only person she wanted to talk to." She was also on occasion a forceful personality to be reckoned with. Even when our parents were there, Mama, Edith, was the one you obeyed. She was interested in life in all its fullness and diversity, and was an attentive and responsive listener, able to empathize with and draw out people from all backgrounds. Although she possessed a deep faith and was a member of the High Anglican community, she was extremely broad-minded and tolerant. This is reflected in the friendship she held and the correspondence she maintained with a diverse and eclectic range of people, including the writer Sean O'Casey and the composer Rutland Boughton, both of whom were communist sympathizers, renowned Irish nationalists such as Michael Collins and Hazel Lavery, the wife of the artist Sir John Lavery, and pillars of the political establishment, including Sir Winston Churchill, to whom she was related by marriage. Her strong interest in women's rights led to Edith becoming a suffragist, though not a member of the more militant suffragette movement, and to her establishment in 1915 of the Women's Legion, an organisation which was to play a leading part in the recognition by society at large of women's ability to organise and undertake not only enterprises in which their skill had been already appreciated, such as nursing and catering, but also types of manual labour for which they were not formally considered suitable, such as agricultural and forestry work and mechanics, thus contributing directly towards women being given the franchise. In recognition of the outstanding part she played in the war effort, Edith was the first to be awarded the newly created honour, Dame Commander of the British Empire in the Military Division. Edith may be considered amongst the handful of spirited, ambitious women who, albeit lacking a sound education and in some instances an appropriate social background, were able to take advantage of the breakdown in social stratification precipitated by the First World War and utilise their considerable charm, natural intelligence and fortune to establish their own social set. Others included Margaret Greville, Nancy Astor, Emerald Cunard, and Laura May Corrigan. Before World War I, the boundaries of society were well defined, and only men of good birth and breeding would have been guests at a ball. The loss of a generation of eligible bachelors in the war precipitated the need to cast the net far wider if sufficient male partners were to be secured, by creating convivial and welcoming homes where guests might enjoy lavish hospitality and witty and amusing conversation. These hostesses consciously attracted the most stimulating and dynamic people of the day. Such parties were where the cleverest met together with the most beautiful, and that is what social life should be. Unlike those of other society hostesses, Edith's salon, known as the Ark Club, was unique in having its own distinct identity. From early 1915, its members met every Wednesday evening on the upper floor of Londonderry House. Non-party political in nature, the club became known as a place where members could relax in a light-hearted way, set the cares of the day to one side, play silly games, and enjoy the finest fare then available in wartime Britain, and sample the contents of the well-stocked Londonderry cellar. Her guests became members of the Order of the Rainbow, symbolising hope during wartime, and were given the name of a beast or a bird or a magical creature, the members' names starting with the same letter or rhyming with their Christian name or surname. The Art Club was later described by Edith as a salon where star and stage met statesmen, liberals and conservatives, writers and charmers, university dons, artists and playwrights. It's surely indicative of her character that Edith was known as Circe, the sorceress, and this subsequently became the name by which she was habitually addressed by her friends. Sorceresses delighted in their ability to exercise power, particularly over men, and so did Edith, on many occasions skillfully employing her charms to promote her husband's political career and her own social and philanthropic aims. Circe was particularly renowned for her vast knowledge of potions and herbs, which she used to drug her enemies, transforming them into animals. The most well-known story about her is told in Homer's Odyssey, when Odysseus visits her island of Aea on the way back from the Trojan War. Her singing lures members of his crew to a drug-laden feast, and they are transformed into swine. Odysseus is warned not to approach, and his great-grandfather, the messenger god Hermes, provides him with the means of resisting Circe's charms and releasing his crew. The idea of providing a venue where a group of people, often from widely differing social backgrounds, ideologies, beliefs, and opinions, could meet in a relaxed and fun-loving way, exchange opinions, enjoy stimulating conversation, and have the opportunity to form new alliances and friendships by fostering a sense of being in another world, at one remove from everyday life, may have played out once again in the atmosphere that Edith, in the guise of Circe the sorceress, sought to create at Mount Stewart. Mount Stewart, as we know it today, was entirely Edith's creation. Upon her husband's appointment as Minister for Education in the first Ulster Parliament in 1921, the couple took up residence at Mount Stewart, the Londonderry's Irish home. The property had been substantially neglected, and Edith seized the opportunity to make extensive improvements and changes, redecorating and refurnishing the house and fashioning the grounds into a series of discrete elements, overseeing and organising the major scheme of work necessary to see her ideas become reality. As Edith would discover, Mount Stewart enjoys a remarkably favourable climate. The growth rate is high, and subtropical and tender plants may be grown. Mount Stewart was thus the result of Edith's own determination, organisational, artistic and planning abilities, her love of the colourful, bold and exotic, her delightful sense of fun and joie de vivre, and her empathy with and deep understanding of Ireland's Celtic past. No wonder it was, as she said, the only place she felt entirely well. The gardens at Mount Stewart are peppered with allusions to the Circe myth. Circe reputedly lived within a charmed wood on the island of Aea. Mount Stewart lies on the western shores of the island-like Ards Peninsula, and adjacent to the mansion, Edith established her Italian garden, enclosed with exotic eucalyptus trees. She, too, was thus effectively living in a clearing within an enchanted wood, where monkey herms, with pigs trotters, bore the faces of Odysseus's sailors. Edith was particularly fascinated by Celtic myths and legends, a subject on which she was expert and wrote many times. including her book Character and Tradition. This interest is clearly reflected in the contents of her library at Mount Stewart. Of particular note is a copy of Ella Young's Celtic Wonder Tales, retellings of stories such as The Children of Lear and The Cow of Plenty, illustrated by the actor and activist Maud Gonne. The book was clearly of considerable significance as far as Edith was concerned. Its illustration for The Cow of Plenty was used by the British sculptor Margaret Wrightson as a model for a stone altarpiece for the east tower of the family burial ground at Mount Stewart, Tir na Nog. Its illustrations were also the inspiration for those in Edith's own book, The Magic Inkpot, a work derived from the bedtime stories she habitually told her youngest daughter, Mary, which took the Londonderry children on a series of adventures, including a boar hunt with the Ulster hero Cuchulainn. Edith's interest in and knowledge of Celtic myths and legends should of course be seen in the wider context of the Irish literary revival, or the Celtic Twilight as it's been called, and its associated movements and cultural organisations, such as the Gaelic League, the Home Rule Movement, and the Gaelic Athletic Association. Douglas Hyde, who was appointed the first Irish president in 1938 and was the first president of the Gaelic League, called for the de-anglicising of the Irish people through a revival of the Irish language and its literary jewels. In this latter, he was joined by writers such as W.B. Yeats and members of his circle, including Lady Gregory, who sought to realise a new national literature in English, but one that nonetheless would be unmistakably Irish and of genuine literary merit. W.B. Yeats and Sean O'Casey were both guests at Mount Stewart, and in 1935, Edith provided funds for O'Casey's American tour. Other artists associated with the movement included Sarah Purser, who was commissioned to produce some coloured glass panels for the windows in the towers of Tir na Nog, and Rutland Boughton's opera, The Immortal Hour, said to blend all the essential elements of the Celtic twilight, was performed at Mount Stewart in 1926. Edith employed many different means to foster a sense of otherworldliness at Mount Stewart. Strong colours were employed, both in the redecoration of the house itself, particularly the bedrooms, and in her garden schemes, which featured plants of intense colour and exotic and extraordinary form or habit. The garden was divided into a series of rooms, each with its own particular character and planting scheme, several of which contained potent images and allusions to Ireland's Celtic past. It also included plants of powerful scents and aromas, which wafted into the house on warm summer's evenings. Their effect was heightened by heady bowls of her own potpourri placed throughout the house, and vases filled with lilies and roses and heavily scented Rhododendron magnificum polar bear. Edith had a special room at Mount Stewart where she prepared potpourri to her own special recipe, perhaps another allusion to the Circe myth. This sense of the extraordinary was heightened still further by the presence of exotic species, such as terrapins lurking in the pools in the Italian garden, monitor lizards sunning themselves beside the swimming pool, striking pink flamingos patrolling the shores of the lake, iridescent blue flashes of the family's pet macaw flying wild, and night hours punctuated by the deep-throated call of the tree frog. Lady Londonderry's first-grade garden mentor, Sir John Ross of Bladensburg, created an outstanding garden near Rostrevor in County Down, which he called Fairyland. According to Edith's granddaughter, for one person at least, Mount Stewart was the new Fairyland. Edith's wit and sense of fun also found frequent expression in the design of the gardens at Mount Stewart, for instance in the creation of a series of topiary figures in the Shamrock Garden, depicting an ancient hunting party featuring members of the Stewart family and an artist friend with a penchant for the bottle, and the use of comical herms in the garden. There can be a few other wives who thought it fitting to design a tomb for their husbands, including symbols reflecting his passion for cards. The spirit, colour, and otherworldliness of Mount Stewart in the 1920s and 30s was captured perfectly by the artist Edmund Brock in his picture of Edith and her three younger daughters, entitled Circe and the Sirens. Edith, as Circe, is dressed in turquoise with a Celtic brooch, holding a goblet containing the potion with which she bewitched Odysseus's crew. Yet all is not as it seems, and her impish sense of humour creeps in even here, with herms bearing the likenesses of her husband and the artist himself. The house was always full of guests, apart from her children and their families, other visitors including prominent politicians, artists and writers, such as Ramsay MacDonald, Sir Winston Churchill, Osbert Sitwell, Harold and Vita Nicholson, Compton Mackenzie, Sir John and Lady Lavery, and Shane Leslie. Her unlikely friendship with Ramsay MacDonald has been the subject of much comment, but both have been reared in the Scottish Highlands and shared a deep love of Highland history, folklore and mythology. Another frequent guest was the Hebridean musician Duncan Morrison, who sang Scottish airs and taught his fellow guests to dance Scottish reels and jigs. In 1935, it was reported, in fact, that Edith was learning Scots Gaelic. Whilst for many of her guests, Mount Stewart's mysterious and powerful allure may have been merely a reflection of the imagery employed and the exotic, colourful and playful elements of its character, for Edith, this sense of otherness had a far deeper, more spiritual aspect. As I've already mentioned, many of the individual gardens at Mount Stewart reflect Edith's passion for Irish mythology. This is particularly the case with regard to the family burial ground, sited within an area known as Tir na Nog, or the land of the ever young. Edith intended Tir na Nog not to be a place of mourning and sorrow, but a joyful spot of hope and rest and peace. Adjacent stands a white stag, upon which dead souls were supposedly conveyed to Tir na Nog. Tir na Nog was one of the names for the Celtic Otherworld, or perhaps part of it. It was thought of as being a supernatural realm of everlasting youth, beauty, health, abundance and joy, where time moves in a different way. The other world was the realm of gods and other supernatural beings, including fairies, who were believed to be capable of crossing into the human world. It was understood as being either a parallel world that existed alongside our own, or a heavenly land beyond the sea or under the earth. It was often entered by ancient burial mounds or caves, such as Bruna Boyne, known as She, or by going underwater or across the Western Sea, and was thus similar to the Elysium of Greek mythology. Over time, the term She came to encompass both the hollow or fairy hills, where otherworldly beings were believed to live, and the beings themselves. By placing Tir na Nog at the centre of the garden she created at Mount Stewart, dominating the landscape surrounding the lake, was Edith perhaps conjuring with the idea of there being two parallel worlds at Mount Stewart, the world of the everyday and an other world, a land of abundance and joy? Writing in 1926 about the garden she had so lovingly created, in an article she entitled Mount Stewart, the Land of Heart's Desire, Edith made it quite clear that she did indeed believe that two worlds coexisted and intermingled at Mount Stewart. There is a feeling of enchantment about the place. It is indeed not hard to believe that in this most mystical land it is even now as much the island of gods and initiates as it was when the sacred fires flashed from its purple, heather-covered, honey-scented mountain-tops and mysterious round towers on island and hill. There are still those left who have not forgotten the ancient wisdom, and who, in their inmost hearts, believe that they, the lordly ones, the highest race of the She, still inhabit Ireland. Is it too great a fantasy to think that these shades are with us now in this land of heart's desire? That they themselves have taken Mount Stewart under their protection and lent a hand in the fashioning of these gardens and glades, and made a garden blossom in the twinkling of an eye where none was before? Indeed, she named specific places within the garden or surrounding area where fairy folk may be seen or sensed, or which they are known to use. Wandering farther afield from the house, you come across a little lochen in the wilder part of the garden, under whose dark brown, burnt amber water most likely lies the entrance to one of the palaces in the realm of fairy. Further ahead in the wood, the dim and distant trees of curious shape and form, casting dark, eerie shadows about them, start you listening and looking in expectancy, and shrinking as if you thought you might see or if not see, at least hear the fairy music. She concludes, as you stand at the top, looking out over the waters of the loch, lit by the rays of the evening sun into opalescent tints, it is indeed a twilight of the gods. A fairy spell of loveliness broods o'er the place. A beauty that is immense glows from the mountains, which breathe majestic peace and calm. Perhaps it is thus not hard to appreciate why Mount Stewart was the place Edith loved above all others. It embodied all she held most dear and meaningful, and where she felt most truly herself. Thank you.